Jai Bhagwan, and good morning. Welcome to Bhakti House. So, we have this question before us today. What is enlightenment? What is this thing all about? What is the purpose of this yoga? But before we dive into this, let's chant the Asatoma prayer. So for those of you who are just joining us possibly for the first time, I lead the Asatoma prayer at the beginning of each class. This is a tradition set by my gurus, my guru and my guru's guru. To set our intention, what are we doing? Briefly, it means lead me from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from a time-bound consciousness to a timeless state of being. And that we have the ability, that we are each the true guru, and that we each create, sustain, and transform everything that we experience. So feel free to chant along the best you can, or feel free to listen. Those 4 words on the second to last line, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, those are the most important words. Om briefly represents everything, and Shanti means peace. In this lineage of yoga, we will use everything, anything, to create peace. It doesn't matter how wonderful or how terrible it is, we can use it to create peace. And the last 2 words are Jai Bhagwan. Jai means victory. Bhagwan means the divine, the light, the spirit. That's you. Victory to you. Let's take a breath in. Now, if they're open, and it's appropriate for your circumstances, allow the eyes to close. As you inhale, bring the hands up to prayer position. As you exhale, let the eyes open. Jai Bhagwan. And again, welcome, dear friends. Enlightenment. What is it? As I looked at the topic for this morning and I thought about this sentence, enlightenment, what is it? I was reminded of a childhood book, or a favorite book from my childhood. Actually, not just from my childhood, it's still a favorite. It's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it mentions a number of books in there. One of them is, Who is this God person anyway? It always makes me laugh when I read that. And as I wrote this out, enlightenment, what is it? I'm like, oh, God, who is this God person anyway? So before we actually, please give me a moment here. Scrolling on an iPad. Interesting. Not as easy as I would want it to be. And if I scroll too fast, I lose bits, and I've lost them. All right, let me find this over here on the Mac really quick. I'll just read it from here. All right. Technology. So, my guru's guru, Bapaji, Swami Kripalu, wrote a book called The Science of Meditation. You can find that at www.naturalmeditation.net. He is looking at a stanza from the Bhagavad Gita. And he says, quoting a couple of lines from the Bhagavad Gita. One is that he who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is the wise among human beings and remains unconcerned even while performing all actions. He then goes on and quotes another piece. O Arjuna, actions do not bind that self-possessed person who has renounced actions through yoga and has destroyed doubts through true knowledge. For those of you who are interested to look up those, that's in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, that's stanza 18 and stanza 41. Then Babaji asks the question. He says, in the stanza under discussion, it is said that actions do not bind the self-possessed. The question arises, who can be called a self-possessed person? In general, it may be said that every human being is self-possessed, except one who does not know the answer to the question, who am I? In this stanza, Lord Krishna has called a self-realized yoga self-possessed, so someone who is enlightened. In fact, he says, the real practice of yoga begins only after self-realization. The real practice of yoga begins only after enlightenment. The purpose of yoga is not enlightenment. Babaji goes on to say, Maharshi Patanjali says, as a result of self-realization, all obstacles are removed, faith is enhanced, and worldly enjoyments no longer remain an attraction. That is which one? Sutra 29, his interpretation of Sutra 29. Then consciousness turns inward and dispels all obstacles or distractions, and that is chanting Om. Let's turn back now, though, to our question. What is this enlightenment? If the real work of yoga only begins after enlightenment, we ought to figure out what this enlightenment is. The mind or the intelligence, thus freed from distractions, encompasses or comprehends the smallest as also the greatest. For it is free from all limitations, from all conditioning, from all coloring, and is therefore like the purest crystal. So the past is no longer affecting the present. It doesn't mean the past is gone, but it means, okay, here's my past, and my past is no longer making decisions for how I act right now, for how I perceive right now, for how I interact with life right now. Lest it should be misunderstood that the intelligence freed from conditioning and coloring is dull, inactive, responsive, and void, it should be remembered that like a pure crystal, which reflects without distortion or confusion any object that is placed near it, the steady and ever-alert intelligence, too, receives and reflects the color or nature of the subject, the predicate, and the object in all situations, instantly, spontaneously, and appropriately. He did not just say, what he did just say is that the enlightened individual still experiences happiness and sadness, anger and joy, fear and elation, all of these sensations, still experiences all of life, but reflects these things appropriately. You're no longer bound by them. You are free of them, or rather, freed from them. It's not that you don't experience these things, but they have no control over you. In the case of the understanding reaching through logic or reasoning, there is confusion on account of the discrepancies that exist between the word description, the meaning, in both connotations as the substance described and as the knowledge of the word meaning, and imagination or assumption. Hence, it is unclear and uncertain. What does that have to do with anything? It's impossible to accurately describe enlightenment because words don't work really well. Satchidananda, in his translation of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, in his commentary, he says, when you start to speak about the truth, you lie. But words are all you have to try to communicate this, so do your very best. So he says, when we try to communicate it just through logic and through words, we don't do a good job. Then in 43, he says, but when the mind stuff, when this is quiet, is cleansed of memory, the self or personality which was nothing but the fragmentation, the conditioning or the coloring, the impurity, is wiped out, as it were. When this is quiet, none of your baggage, none of that past, whether it's past events or past hopes for the future, when those things are wiped out, the substance or truth alone shines without distortion, logic, or reasoning, which is the function of the limited personality. So the function of the limited personality is logic and reasoning. But you can't reason your way into enlightenment. He says it must be experienced. And then literally like turning a light on, there it is. There it is. And the thing is, you recognize, there it is. Wait, it's always been here. I have never not been this. How did I miss it before? How did I not see this? Now, enlightenment is not some state of being. Enlightenment is a recognition of being. Because if it's a state of being, that means you can be in and out of enlightenment. But if it's always present, how can you be in and out of something that's always present? It's not possible. You can be in and out of knowing. You can be in and out of that recognition. But the essence, consciousness, is constant and ever present, and you are always that. So in 44, whatever has been said above also applies to similar distinctions between the other methods already suggested, like the method of inquiry and spontaneous awareness. Thus, by this, they and all the subtleties involved have been explained, leaving only the subtlest experiencer of awareness to be dealt with. So, even with all of these experiences, that there's a witness and an empty mind, it still appears to be two. And there's still an even subtler experience of this, where witness and emptiness of mind, or witness and absolute chaos, are recognized as being one contiguous whole. When the subtle experiencer of the inner awareness is observed, without interruption, one arrives at that which has no identification, no separation, or distinguishing mark, but which at the same time is not a void. You've had those moments where you just seem to fade away into the scenery yourself. But it's not an emptiness. It's not a void. But there's no separation, no distinction between the observer and what is observed. It is just one moment, one experience. When thus the subtle experiencer of the inner awareness, just read that. It's like, that sounds very familiar. 46, that indeed is the realization of the homogeneous cosmic essence. All of this, the entity that appears to be sitting where you are, the entity that appears to be sitting where I am, and the very fact there appears to be some sort of separation, dissolves. And there is only this oneness. That indeed is the realization of the homogeneous cosmic essence, though even in it there exists the seed of potential fragmentation. That there is still I and you and you and me, which is the consciousness of the individuality or the observer. He's not saying this is a bad thing. He's just saying it's part of our experience in existence. Proficiency. This takes practice. Proficiency in such observation dispenses with even self-inquiry, on account of the uninterrupted self-awareness being natural. Then there is spiritual enlightenment, peace, and bliss. So this is taking things in even a step further. From simply recognizing, oh yes, I am awareness. I know I am awareness. I know I am awareness. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you? Oh, wait. I am awareness. I am awareness. To where we become established in this knowing of awareness. And I have one student who has had recent experience with this. He said, Ram Dass, I had this tremendous experience, huge experience. But ever since then, and I mentioned this the other day, there's been this undercurrent of peace. And I've experienced some anger, but there was peace underneath it, and some frustration, and some happiness, and it was just always peaceful. And it was almost like the anger came up and I went, oh, look, anger, whatever. Oh, look, frustration, whatever. Oh, look, happiness, whatever. Not that they were ignoring it or being blasé about these things, but the anger, the frustration, and even the happiness didn't grab a hold of them and jerk them around and pull them into things. They experienced the anger, and they experienced the frustration, and they experienced the happiness. But they weren't disturbed by any of them. They remained peaceful while there was anger, peaceful while there was frustration, peaceful while there was happiness. And that sounds like a contradiction. And actually, as they described it, I could see the bewilderment on their face. How is this possible? I know what I experienced, but as I'm listening to what I'm saying and I'm reflecting back on this experience, it seems crazy, because how is that possible? And yet that was their own experience. That is the experience that Patanjali is talking about. Proficiency in such observation dispenses with even self-inquiry, on account of the uninterrupted self-awareness being natural. Steadiness, steadiness, steadiness. Then there is spiritual enlightenment, peace, and bliss. Again, it's not that these other experiences vanish. Human life continues on. There's that Zen koan: before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. Such enlightenment, 48, is saturated with harmony, order, and righteousness. And again, drawing from this one student's experience, so that you're not believing me. You're hearing some other student, their experience with the same thing. Life just seems to be falling in place for me. I don't have... This individual has a number of little things they've been working on over time, trying to improve their life. And they're like, these things I've had to work at so hard in the past, they're becoming easy. And I'm not doing anything to make them easy. I don't have to fight and force myself to do the right thing. I don't want to do anything other than the right thing. It's what's naturally attractive to me now. "49. This enlightenment, this understanding, this realization is quite different from what one has heard about or deduced. You can't get to it by thinking about it. You have to experience it. It is quite different from what one has heard about or deduced from teaching obtained from external sources. Whereas in the case of the latter, the object of study, investigation, and understanding is outside of consciousness, like this book. The realization arrived at in the former, what we are talking about right now, is of a special category. It's not book learning. You can't work yourself up into some sort of yogic fit and have it. It's a realization as you continue to study and continue to practice, like turning a light on. You can suddenly see the whole room instead of just a little teeny spot where your little teeny candle is. The light turns on and you realize what really has happened is your eyes have been closed this whole time. And all you really did was open your eyes. And what was available in the room the entire time is now obvious. This special realization of spontaneous self-awareness completely transmutes the entire being, and there is total change. I watched it happen again and again in slices. For most people, it happens in slices. It's like the eyes peek open just a little bit, and just a little bit more. And for some people, the eyes just pop open. Sometimes when your eyes just pop open, it can be a little startling, your experience. That's normal. Most people, little slices, little slices, little slices. When even that special realization, with the seed of fragmentation still present, is transcended. So there's even a step beyond that. Everything is transcended. And the seeker has, as it were, come one full circle. The seeker is entirely absorbed in the seeking. The reality realizes itself without the need for the individual, even in his subtlest state. This indeed is the enlightenment for which there is no seed at all for the manifestation of diversity. This is a moment when we not just intellectually believe, because we've already talked about this you can't arrive at this through intellect. The only way you can arrive at this is through your own direct experience. Well, Ramdas, how do I get that direct experience? You have to set things up. And how do we set things up? What is the setup? Now, when a sincere seeker approaches an enlightened teacher with the right attitude of discipleship, free of preconceived notions and prejudices and full of intelligent faith and receptivity, and with the right spirit of inquiry, at the right time and the right place, communication of yoga takes place. you have to have the correct setup. So here's the setup. First off, you need to be the correct seeker. That is the most important piece. Right attitude of discipleship, free of preconceived notions and prejudices. That's hard, because you're going to be encountering things you're not used to hearing, and that you're definitely not ready to believe. And please don't believe. Try things out. Full of intelligent faith, don't be hoodwinked. And being receptive, those three things. With the right spirit of inquiry. So you have all four of those, and really the right spirit of inquiry is defined already by free of preconceived notions and prejudices, full of intelligent faith and receptivity. Because if you have those things, you will ask appropriate questions to help you learn. And then you set about practicing. But you don't just touch your toes. You touch the toes and then you focus on what's the effect of touching my toes. You focus on the inward aspect of everything you experience. You focus inward, 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 inward. And that begins to set the stage. You've got to have someone who has experienced this themselves. If you're going to try this on your own, you'll make progress. But it's going to be hard going. And I mean really hard and really slow. You need someone who has experience with this themselves. Because then the progress is faster. It's still hard, because all of a sudden you realize you are not who you thought you were. But our time has kind of come to a close, so I will make a note and we will focus on that next time. So on Monday, the setup. How does standing around in funny little shapes on a yoga mat lead to enlightenment? Step by step, without skipping any steps, requiring blind faith or believing in magic. Okay? Let's take a moment, close the eyes. Breathe. We'll chant one sound of Om together. Remember, this Om reflects you, not the personality, but the universal indwelling one that you are. Let's take a breath in. As you inhale, bring the hands to prayer position. As you exhale, let the eyes open. Jai Bhagwan. Have a good weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Jai Bhagwan.